did travel to Egypt and lead not sheep, but the Hebrew people out of slavery and into the land of milk and honey. Well, here we are a few weeks later, and we've come to another installment of the story of the Hebrew people. But as today's story begins, there seems to be a whole lot of dissension among the ranks. You see, people were beginning to realize that they weren't in the land of milk and honey after all. No siree. Instead, they found themselves in the middle of the desert wilderness, where the scorching sun beat down on them during the day and the nights were freezing cold. As if the heat of the day and the cold of the night weren't bad enough, everyone was beginning to run out of food. Oh, sure, they had listened to Moses and had packed up whatever food they could, and yes, they had lots of that unleavened bread stuff, but it wasn't enough. The Hebrew people were convinced that there had to be more. After all, Moses told everybody that God would take good care of them from now on. Here's how it went. Moses promised everybody that they wouldn't have to work day and night making bricks and mortar or build those lousy pyramids anymore. Freedom at last, and indeed it all started out really great too. The Egyptians got what they deserved. They ended up drowning in the waters of the sea. Remember that part of the story? And the Hebrew people tasted freedom from forced labor for the first time in generations. Hooray! They all shouted, Moses is great, we love you, big guy. But it didn't take long for the euphoria and enthusiasm to disappear. Life was going downhill quickly. People were getting hungry, so they started complaining. Where is this promised land, Moses? You got us out here in the desert wasteland and we haven't had a bite to eat for a long time. We're convinced that you're taking us on a wild goose chase. We wouldn't be surprised if you're leading us around in circles. We're sure we've seen the same rocks and scraggly bushes over and over. Obviously, we can't count on you after all. We would have been better off if you had just left us alone in Egypt. The work was horrible, but at least we had something to eat. We're tired and hungry. We miss the figs and meat and fish, cucumbers, melons, olives, leeks, garlics, and loaves of bread. All we can think of are those wonderful loaves of bread fresh from the oven. Come on, Moses, what's the matter? Why won't God make life easy for us after all we have been through? Now, there's something about an angry mob that can strike fear into anyone, and Moses was no exception. After all, he and his brother Aaron were only human. What could they do? They didn't have the power to make it rain bread from heaven. Feeding the grumbling brute was more than Moses and Aaron could handle. So they decided it was time to talk with God. Now that was a good decision. And isn't that just like the rest of us? About the time we're ready to give up, that's when we decide to call on God to rescue us. So, frustrated and angry, Moses has a little talk with God. You know, God, Moses pointed out, I didn't want this job in the first place. I kept trying to tell you I wasn't the right person for this sort of thing, but you refused to listen. You just wouldn't take no for an answer. And so I agreed to do the best I could as long as you, God, were willing to help me. And I must say that you did help me along the way. Sure, we had some trouble with Pharaoh, but you and I did eventually manage to help him see the light. And I have to tell you that parting the sea that night was nothing short of miraculous. But now I have a bunch of disgruntled, noisy, grumbling Hebrews on my hands. That's not what I signed up for, God. You've got to do something here. I'm going to quit trying to lead these complainers. I'm begging you, God, come through now or you're on your own. You can handle these Tell everyone that when they get up tomorrow morning, there will be bread on the ground just waiting for them. Every morning, from now on, you'll get just exactly what you need to get through the day. It will rain bread from heaven every night, and bread from heaven every night, and be there for you in the morning. And since you all need a balanced diet, I'll make sure that you have some meat every evening. You'll find quail galore just ready for you to roast for your evening meal. But remember, you'll only get exactly what you need. No more, no less. And on Friday evening, you'll get 2 days' worth, because no one should be going around making bread on the Sabbath. Any questions, Moses? And so Moses replied, no, I think I've got it. Bread stuff in the morning and quail meat in the evening. Thanks, God. Sure enough, the next morning, our moaning, groaning, complaining Hebrews found some white, flaky stuff on the ground. What is it? They all wondered, and Moses explained, it's bread from heaven. Now, there's been a great deal of speculation over the years about exactly what manna was. The Bible says it was like coriander seed, white and tasted like wafers made with hot honey. The name comes from the Hebrew manhu, which means, what is it? But if you go to the Sinai Peninsula, it will not stay a mystery for very long. The Bedouin who live there still gather it and bake it into bread, which they call manna. The flakes themselves come from, listen to this, plant lice that feed on the local tamarisk trees. Now, because the sap is poor in nitrogen, the bugs have to eat a whole lot of it in order to live. They excrete the extra in a yellowish-white flake or ball of juice from the tree that is rich in carbohydrates and sugar. It decays quickly and attracts ants, so a daily portion is the most anyone gathers. Aren't you glad we don't have to do that? So much for what manna is, and I think we can all be thankful that we don't have to eat it. But if you're out there wandering around in the desert with your stomach growling, this stuff is probably better than nothing. Now, as you and I know, there are always some people who just refuse to listen. So when the manna began showing up in the morning, some crafty Hebrews decided to take more than their fair share and hoard it. You know, keep it just in case God forgot one day. But these clever hoarders soon discovered that the ants came swarming into their tents and ate every last bit of saved manna. So much for trying to take more than they needed. You see, I think those who felt they needed more forgot who sent the manna in the first place. It's God who provides for us and is generous with each one of us. That we still insist on moaning and groaning when we don't get the miracle that we are praying for. We even might begin to think that God isn't paying attention to us, or worse yet, we might think that God isn't there at all. So we begin to compare what we have with what other people have. That's when we begin to complain and grumble, because other people appear to have so much more manna than we have. How is it, we ask ourselves, that our so-called friends have all the luck, all the good health, all the love, all the things I don't have? Moan, groan, complain. And while we grumble, we end up missing all the goodness that we do have. We miss the gifts God has given us. We forget that we have a roof over our heads, plenty of food in the fridge and freezer, clothes in our closets, love, a family, and friends. The list goes on and on. Friends, it's not what we have that matters. It's recognizing who has provided for us that counts. It wasn't from one day to the next. The disciples were bugging Jesus about who was going to get into heaven first. They too had forgotten that God's generosity was raining down on them as well. They wanted to be first in line when it came to this new life business. They found themselves jockeying for position, competing for first place. Jesus tells us that we need what we need to do in order to get there first. I could just imagine that Jesus was getting rather tired of trying to explain just how God sees the world. So he told a story about a landowner and some workers. Now in those days, there were a lot of poor people living in Palestine without steady work. From one day to the next, they worked at different jobs in order to secure employment for the day. They would gather before sunrise in the village marketplace where overseers or landowners would come and hire them for the day. The day's pay was a substance wage that provided basic food and clothing. Whenever the landowner herself showed up, the workers knew they could count on being well paid. And we're not today, because we just happen to have a landowner who is looking for some hard-working souls to help out in her vineyards. Once upon a time, I need the workers.
You in it? You come. No.
For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the workers for the usual daily wage, the landowner sent them out into the vineyard.
I need 2 workers.
The landowner went out around 9 o'clock and saw others standing there doing nothing. So the landowner said to them,
I need 2 more workers. It's 9. Yeah, just go.
No, not here. I guess we're going to take a break.
You also go into the vineyard. There are still lots of grapes to pick, and I'll pay you whatever is right.
2 more workers were chosen when the landowner went out looking for more help around lunchtime. And again around 3 o'clock.
All right, it's lunchtime now. I need 2 more workers to go out. I have my grapes. I haven't been picked yet. I need 2 more people. I'll pay you whatever is right. So now it's 3 o'clock, and by golly, I still need 2 more workers to go out. They're picking all people.
Around 5 o'clock, the landowner went out again and found others standing around.
Why are you standing around doing nothing? There are still lots of grapes to pick. You 2 go out in the vineyard now. Yeah, you should brought grapes to take food.
At the end of the day, the landowner called all the workers together to pay them. The landowner began with the workers who were hired last.
I need all of the workers to come because it's time to be paid.
When those hired about 5 o'clock
Who
came,
were the ones hired at 5 o'clock?
each of them received the usual daily wage.
Who are my 3? Who are my 3 o'clock? Or wait a minute. Okay. All right. Okay, go ahead.
Now when the first hire came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner.
We're getting more. We were early. Sunday. We've been sweating all day. All day. They're gonna get pictures? Oh my gosh. You know what? We need 2 hands down.
No, it's their euros. They're euros or they're Ukrainian hryvnia.
What?
That's what I would say.
Is that what you got?
They got the same stuff as we got.
All day. All day. My gosh. We're gonna eat a lot of grapes.
I'm telling you.
So
Enough for this again.
The only two people not complaining are the white ones. You have no reason to.
Next time we're going to the vineyard after the wine is made.
Next time we're going to do that.
Yeah.
Friends, I am doing no wrong. Didn't you agree with me to work for the usual daily wage? Didn't you?
Yeah.
Take what you have and go. I choose to give to those who came last the same as I've given to those who came first. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I'm being generous?
Generous.
I love these workers, aren't they great?
We're not working for this landowner again.
I'm not coming here.
Do all I have for girls.
Yes, yes,
Some of
keep
the
it.
Irene, stop whining.
Hey, I'm getting my money back.
Incredible.
Thank you all very much. Did you hear that? It's just not fair. How come they got the most and we got the least? Did you hear that? We worked hard all day and ended up with the same pay as those slackers who only worked for an hour. We've been cheated. Is that all there is? Now, just wait a minute. The landowner says, did any of you go home empty-handed? Didn't you all get paid equally? Don't you each have enough money to buy some dinner for yourselves and your family? 2 gold coins each. That's abundance. Maybe it's all in our perspective. If we were at the end of the line, would we think differently? Would we see a generous God if we were someplace else in the grand line?